Welcome to the Day Witness podcast. You probably heard a little bit about us from our sister podcast project called the She Witness. In the Day Witness podcast, we'll be covering the topic of discrimination. So today we have Abib Ramadan Bangura, who's 25. He was born in Sierra Leone in the middle of a civil war that started in 1992. The war started at the border of Nigeria and ended in 2002. At the age of 1, his family sought asylum in Guinea with the help of political connections and came to Norway when he was at the age of 5, up in Bergen first. And then at the age of 11, the family and him has moved to Oslo. And he has a degree in electrician. Yeah. And today we'll be talking a little bit about your upbringing here as a minority, but I like to use the word global majority instead of minority, as you learn as you go along. These terminology changes over time, and also why it is important to use the right terminology. So first off, I want to say thank you for coming in and sharing your story. I know that you'll be going back into some unpleasant experiences and time as you're growing up. So why don't you walk us through the very first discrimination that you remember?
I believe I have experienced a certain amount of discrimination, but I can't remember them in perfect, memory. But I know at least one I was sure about was when I was on my way as an apprentice. I was in a school, they're called Nelfo, where we learn about electrician works and everything. I was walking with one of my friends named Pete, Norwegian, and we were walking on our way to go to a bus stop. He was going to take another bus, I was going to take the bus home. And for some reason, he said, I gotta go, and I left him, and I went on my own way, and then a police car came and stopped next to me. And, at the time, I was young, and I have seen a lot of, videos on social media about how police can be dangerous. But of course, I didn't believe that it could happen in Norway, where discrimination could happen with the police, because I was somewhat naive. So the police stopped by next to me and said, "Hey, where are you going?" And I'm like, "I'm going home. I'm going to help my mom and get the groceries," because she called me to go help her pick the groceries. And they started asking me questions and asked me to show them what's inside my bag and who was the other guy, and just kept on interrogating me. I gave them my ID, because when I asked my parents what to do if I get stopped by police, they said, just comply with whatever. That's the best way to get out of the situation. So I completely complied. I gave them all the information. And then what kind of made me realize that it was a necessary search on me was because when they were finished doing the information, it was like, "Oh, he has a clean slate." And I'm like, "You didn't expect that from a child, or?"
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was kind of weird. And then the bus came, and I saw the bus go, and my mom was calling me like, "Yeah, hurry up," sending me messages. And I asked the police, "Would you kindly just drive me up to this train station, the bus station where my mom is?" And they literally looked at me and scoffed and like, "We don't care," and they just left me. And then I had to call my mom. And when I called my mom and explained to her that I got stopped by the police, her reaction was kind of dramatic. She was like, "What happened? What did they do anything to you? Did you say anything wrong? Did they check your ID? Did you comply?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And that was one of my most realistic experience with how the discrimination got, because they were following us. I realized all the way up until I was separated from the other guy, and then they asked me the question.
Oh,
And
really?
the other guy just went his own way. And I was like, "But why didn't you stop both of us at the time?" Because they were behind us all this time. I just didn't realize that. And that was somewhat first of my own experience of discrimination.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was maybe 15, 16, if I remember correct.
That's quite young.
Yeah, that's. But I have, of course, other experiences when I was younger, but it's kind of all foggy.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to differentiate them. Because when you grow up, when you come to Norway and you want to adapt, since I came here, I was 5 years old. It was very difficult for me learn two different culture at the same time. The culture from my own family, from Africa, and the culture in Norway. And since when I'm spending from 7 o'clock to 3 o'clock at school, I learned the Norwegian culture. And then I come home and I'm exhausted from learning both Norwegian math and all this Norwegian, yeah, situations. I don't know how to say it. And I come home and then I have to learn my own culture at the same time. And that just drained me completely. And it was very difficult for my parents as well, because they were the one that got the heavy part of the racism. When they wanted to apply for jobs, the people that were supervising them meant they were unworthy to get the jobs or even go on an interview. So the job they used to get was cleaning and the low-end jobs.
When you say supervisor, who do you mean the supervisor? Like from NAV or from?
I think it was from NAV. Now I'm not so sure because I was young. But I believe it was from NAV because we didn't have any way to get income. And I believe now that I'm older, I realized that my parents came with their own traumas to Norway, and they didn't get time to grieve or reflect or contemplate on their own traumas. They just had to get here and find a way to survive all over again in a whole new environment with no experience, no understanding of the language or the system. I was lucky enough, I was growing up, so I had multiple chances to do mistakes and grow up, but they didn't. They had to learn as fast as possible to get the income, to make sure we thrive in the way we lived.
And did they take any Norwegian language classes or anything
I believe
like that?
so. They can speak Norwegian now, of course, but it's very flawed. So yeah, but they try to do their best. I believe they try to do their best, because when you come as an immigrant, it's not, you can't just forget about your country. It's not that you just come here and now everything's new. No, you think about maybe your cousin that you had to leave behind, or all your memories as an adult or a young person is in your country where you come from. And when you come here, they don't have that understanding that you're coming with a whole other point of view in your life, and you can't just throw all that away to learn a whole new system. It's very difficult to do that for anybody. So, yeah.
How do you feel about that experience when the police stopped you? And knowing what you know now, also from your parents' background, and obviously you are listening how hard it is for your parents as well, and obviously you being in between cultures. How has those events, particularly this one, I guess, of discrimination, how did that impact you?
It left me confused because I didn't understand what was the point. When I was, I haven't learned about how racism actually functions yet. I didn't believe in it because I haven't, it's hard to grasp it when all the people around you do not experience it, but you do. So you don't have anybody to talk to. When you talk to your parents, they have learned just to just comply. That's their own way of coping, complying and accepting. And for me, when you're young, you're rowdy, you're rebellious, and I didn't like that. So I started doing some research on slavery and African culture, and that's when it hit me. That's when I realized the whole structure of people like me, people of color in general, what they have been through and how the exploitation is still happening till this day. And it was heavy. It was like a world breaker, because here I am, naive, just thinking, they just stopped me because maybe I did something wrong. That was the first thing I came to mind. Maybe I was looking suspicious. I even thought I was wearing all black, so maybe I look like a criminal. That was the first thing I thought. But then I realized my friend was also wearing all black. We were wearing Nikes, tracksuits. So I was like, it just.
But your friend, was he black?
No, he was Norwegian.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
He didn't get the treatment. When I asked him if they stopped him later on, because they drove his way, he said, "Oh, they just looked at me." Because I told him, "Did you see the police car?" They're like, "Yeah, they just passed by you." He's like, "Yeah." They didn't ask anything. He's like, "No, they didn't even look at me. They just went by." And I'm like, "But if you're going to interrogate me, shouldn't you interrogate the other person as well? Because you're suspicious about our activities, not my activity, but our." And that's when I realized something wasn't right. And for many people,
But was this also like your one experience with the police, or is there multiple other
there's
times?
multiple.
Multiple. Okay.
Yeah.
How many times have the police stopped you now?
I would say 6 times,
Se-
6, 7 times.
6, 7 times.
Yeah.
And you're 25.
Yeah, 25. They stopped me. It was one time. I was driving and I didn't have the light. Like I had the parking lights on because I was charging my car. I just drove like out, and then they stopped me, and they of course did their job. And that was that one time wasn't that bad. It was just normal. But the other time, I wasn't even in my car. I was standing outside, and then they came to me and they just asked me, "Do you know any? Do you live here?" I'm like, "Yeah." They start asking me if I know any suspicious activities going on, and I'm like, no, I don't. No, I don't know. And then they were like, thank you for your time, and then they left. But on my way home, they were following me. Yeah, and I was kind of scared because I was like, why are they following me with their car? It was just following me. I was going to take the subway, and I realized that I don't know I wanted to say. This is more on the west side. When I went to the east side, I saw some, young adults, young kids, smoking cannabis, and I saw the police car on the opposite road, and they didn't even budge. But I know if that had happened in the west, they would definitely do not take an action. There's been a lot of, how should I say it? From my experience when it comes to the police, when it comes to the system, I would say I got off easy. But from people I've heard from my family, from my friends, they have had it much worse than me. So I believe I'm more lucky that they just ask questions and mostly leave me be than I don't know what they do, to be honest.
So when the police stop you, did they ever kind of I know, like in Norway, they have like this curtailing ordering that the community is trying, particularly the black community, is trying to push forward, so that every single time a police stops you, that they should give you a receipt, so that you get an understanding of why they stopped you in the first place. Did any of that happen? Like, no.
I asked them why they stopped me. They said because they wanted to. That's my answer.
Because they wanted to.
Yeah, they wanted to. So that's what I get from them. But I realized that there's a difference between the police that have that doesn't have an Norwegian background and police that have a Norwegian background. I realized there's a small difference there. I'm not trying to put like a bad light on them. I'm just saying I realized that they have this almost feels like a systematic point of view. I don't know if from their own personal experience or how they are taught as a police officer, I don't know. But it feels like they expect people of color to be in more dangerous situations than opposite, the ethnic Norwegian that lives here.
So you feel like maybe they have some kind of filter?
Yeah, like somewhat. It's hard to see because here in Norway, you can't say it's hard to just say this is straight up racism. In America, you can talk this is racism, that is racism, but here in Norway, it's always in the shadow background. That's how I realized it. I can give you an example where I experienced one of my colleagues trying to explain to me. He's trying to explain to me how the N-word, I can say, works. And around we were sitting in lunch, he just started explaining to me how N-word works and how he looks at it, like how he sees the N-word and how he uses it. And he said it's the color for me. And I told him you can't sit here and explain to a person that has experienced countless use of that word in their lifetime and tell me how I'm supposed to reflect on it. I'm the one that get called it. You're not the one.
Right.
And even when I told him, my family, because I asked my parents when I was young, I was like, were we slaves? I asked my mom and dad, were we slaves? They're like, no. I'm like, wait, what? We weren't slaves. We were able to survive in our own country and we had our own businesses. We were thriving until the Civil War came. So I'm like, so we have nothing to do with slavery? He's like, no, we have nothing to do with slavery. And that's when I realized that then why are they calling me that word if that word is supposed to mean, something negative about slaves, And it gave me a reflection that there's a lot of different perspective for people, but for some reason, when it comes to people of color, especially Africans, it's easier for most of them to see the negative for some reason, even though it's not there. And what really broke me was when I found out about the children in Congo, the cobalt mines in Congo, where like a lot of percent of the technology evolution is based off of the cheap labor that's happening there, because the cobalt mining and the minerals is needed to make phones, car battery, battery in general. And when I read about how these children don't even know there's a world that exists. All they know is that mine, and they go in there and people die there, and there's no repercussions. It's just straight up labor trafficking. It kind of gives me a depressive point of view in life, because I want to believe in the good in people, but yeah, slavery has been going on for a long time. Some people even believe it's written in history, like it's in human nature. I don't believe that. It's just, yeah.
I guess it's like, how do you feel at this moment? Because I can see that there is, obviously you're born here. No, you're not born here, but you've been raised here, and you sort of, you speak fluent Norwegian, and you kind of know the Norwegian system, and you're exposed to this almost on a day-to-day basis. Do you feel deep down that you're torn between cultures?
Yeah.
Do you think that, do you seek some kind of, because what I see is certain pain, that you want to see the beauty of different cultures, your own and also the Norwegian culture.
That's the optimistic, yeah.
But also at the same time, this is happening to you on a day-to-day basis. What I'm hearing is not just the police incidents that are happening, but it's also like comments from your coworkers, or maybe even your classmates or so forth. How does that make you feel? Like, how are you navigating those emotions?
To be honest, even when I'm doing this interview right now, I'm trying to use as little, what's the word should I say? I'm trying to be as polite as possible with this when I'm talking about my experience, because I don't like to, put a bad picture on other people. But when they do things that affect my point of view, it's so difficult, because like you said, I have both my own culture and the Norwegian culture, and there's always a conflict every day, how I should react. When I wanted to get my first job, I had to, I didn't even, my first interview was an accident for getting my job. He was supposed to have somebody else in the interview, but he read the wrong name. So when I came, he was shocked. He was like, "Who are you?" And already I had, relaxed because my mom was like, "You got to look for a representative," and her point of view was, relax your hair, look as, like she called it, as white as possible, even though that's not possible. And I've always, when I go to my parents and ask them, explain them my story of the discrimination I've experienced, they don't know what to do, because they have also experienced their own discrimination and didn't have no one to go to except for themselves. So the only thing they taught me is to hold on. Just hold on and keep on moving. And that's what I've been using. And to be honest, I think from a young age that has actually affected me psychologically, to the point where when I experience racism, my brain just literally like brushes off the racist part and be like, it's an accident, it's a mistake. It didn't happen like that, And I started thinking, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe like I said, I was wearing all black. Maybe it was my fault. Because if I have to accept that racism is happening to me, a lot of times, I don't know how I'm going to go on smiling every day. That wouldn't be possible. I can give you a literally amazing example, or not amazing, terrible example. I was at a birthday party. We were in a pub in Oslo bowling, and we were literally just talking. And then we started talking about racism. And I told them I experience racism every day, and they didn't believe me almost. Like I said, okay, I experience racism almost every day, and it's like, no, that's not true. That was a Pakistanis that told me that, and I'm like, I do. And I promised on my mother, the day, like the minute we went out to go and drink and party somewhere else, a random Norwegian guy comes to me and tells me, you're too dark to stay here. And it was so like, everybody just stopped and froze. They were like, wait, is this happening? No way this is happening. And he was drunk and everything. And I saw it coming. Like I wasn't even shocked. I wasn't scared. I was just cold. And I just had to shut myself out because when you tell people, go ahead.
No, just go.
I just want to say, when you tell people that you experience something and they don't believe you, where do you go now? Like now you have to keep it to yourself because, and even though people that believe you tells you that we can't help you because we also have the same situation where people don't, react good enough to help us. And I can just imagine how it could be for other people that have experienced worse. And I
think it's interesting how you are presenting this, where I feel like you have to minimize yourself. You have to minimize your pain, your suffering, who you are, your identity, in order to get that job, to be accepted.
Yeah, I see it like that. That's actually you're on point.
So when you're minimizing yourself, you're not really being yourself in this society.
No.
So I think that's where it's so painful to talk about these subjects of discrimination and racism because people don't believe you. And I think that's why your story is so important in raising that and saying that it is happening.
Yeah.
Do you think, what do you hope, I guess, that something could be changed? What do you think can be done so that the Norwegian society, when someone tells them, hey, I experienced this, to be believed?
I think you should have, the person you're telling the story to should have a connection with the same experience in somewhat way or form or shape. When I explain to somebody that, have experienced like you and have experienced similar, I can actually say traumas, you feel less alone, and that's already a good start. I think that's the most important thing. People that tell their stories that do not get believed, their biggest problem after that is being alone with that thought, that experience, with no way out. There's no way to express yourself to anybody else except yourself, and that can be so isolating. I think if people that can help each other should be the person that has, the degree, of course, but at the same time, they need to have the experience somewhat. They need to know what it feels like as well. Not just read about it and be like, okay, this is the information. But if they know what it feels like, I can automatically feel the difference between a person that has experienced something like me and a person that haven't. Their reactions, their expressions, their way of thinking, and their solutions as well. You realize that the solutions are just as naive as possible, and that's the truth. But when I have talked to people that have experienced similar things or even worse, and I tell them this, they understand, and I can feel that. I can feel like they understand. I think if we could have a space for people to talk about their difficulties, their experiences with other people with similar events, that have experienced similar events, it's already a good start. I don't have the best solution. That's
No.
that's difficult.
No, but it's more like, what change would you like to see in Norway? What could be perhaps be done, like you have experiences with the police, is it the fact that the police should be better trained, in this and understand their own biases, and have, particularly with my work, the issue I have a lot of the times is like there's not enough research to back what people are telling me on a day-to-day basis. And that's the hardest part, because if you can't track it, if you can't measure it, if you cannot like hold on to these statistics, it's very hard to make change. Like it's still gaslighting, and so you're dismissing of something to say like, oh, Norway's the best country in the world, our police force is great, blah, blah, blah. There's no way of moving forward, really, if they do not accept that they can be in the wrong, that they have biases. So to say that you don't have biases is crazy in my mind. Like everyone has
Everyone
biases.
has biases.
Like,
you're born with it
you
almost.
also mentioned, like, you spoken to a friend of you with a Pakistani background. It's like, no way, that cannot happen, right? So even though he's a minority of us, but he doesn't feel like there is, there is that kind of extent for him. So I think on an individual basis, and how things are quite different for minorities or the global majorities, how each one of them experience things are quite different in a sense. And I can relate when you said that, when someone told you like you don't belong here. So, I've been here for 12 years, but I was here before that as a student, back in 2007. So I remember taking my friend, who's a classmate, she was Norwegian, back to her home because she was feeling unwell. And I remember waiting at the metro station, and a man came up to me. And at that time, I knew a little bit of Norwegian, but I instantly knew what he said, because as soon as I heard the word, "Go back to China," I actually minimized myself, because I don't want to get hurt, because I was just on my own at the time. So I was literally kind of like earplugs on and just kind of minimized myself, looked away from him, make myself small, that I'm harmless, do not hurt me kind of thing. And then he tried the eye contact with me, but I was kept looking away. I didn't want to. I was still a kid back then, I feel like. And then as soon as he walked off, I saw a lady coming with a pram, and she overheard the whole entire conversation and what he said to me, and she just kept apologizing. And I was like going, it's okay, what are you going to do about it?
That's the thing, you almost got to brush it off. You got to like brush it off and just get up and keep on moving, even though like now that I'm grown, now is when it's starting to hit me, actually. Like not when I was younger, because I didn't have, there was too much going on, experiencing new things every day almost, and everything was going on. But now when I sit and reflect, it's crazy how, like, it doesn't make sense even from, it's weird, because when I see other people like Norwegians and other people of color, Pakistanis and those, they have their own category of discrimination for some reason. Like, it's hard to explain. Everybody has their own category of discrimination, some way, shape or form. But the people that have it least, in my opinion, is the people that own this country, the people that live in it, like the ethnic people here, because it's their country. And we got to remember, like, I read about systematic racism, where, when, especially America, since America has a huge influence in almost every country, when they, made the Fifth of a Man or whatever amendments, which they say, like, black people are not human, they're like a fifth of a man or something. And then I learned, I don't know, forget about that. I want to explain to you something very important.
Okay.
It's about when I was at the BLM demonstration, Black Lives Matter demonstration, that happened before COVID, I think, or in the midst of COVID. My partner, Alina, had written on a board, learn about Norwegian slave trade. And I read that, I'm like, wait, what? Because even I didn't know that. I'm like, why did you write that before we left the house? Why did you write it? She's like, you didn't read it? Denmark was making slave boats, and Norwegian was there helping us with the Finnish people as well. And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, okay, I didn't know that. And I wrote, like, love black people like you love black culture, because black culture is literally spread like small seeds everywhere. And this journalist came and he took a picture of my billboard, and you know he nodded. I'm like, okay, I felt the energy with everybody. We were happy.
Yeah.
We were fighting for the rights of people of color. And then he saw her billboard and he just stopped and just took the camera down and left. And that gave me like, it was a simple move, but it was a profound moment that made me decide. That made me realize like the media decides what they want to promote, no matter how much I stand here and screaming. They will say, this is amazing, look at how young youth are, you know, demonstrating to help black people get their rights. But this isn't the first time, and it won't be the last time either. And when I realized that, it made sense to why my parents had given up, because I can just imagine how long they have been fighting to get the changes they needed, and they gave up. But the changes still happen, but now it's my turn, and I realized, you know what, I gotta find a different way to do this.
Is that one of the reasons why you went into doing video? Because you're into media as well, you know. And I think that's quite interesting because that's how I went into media.
Yes.
Obviously with the Oslo, you know, and I think it's interesting when you bring up the media, how that has affected you on a personal level as well. And just witnessing a journalist taking that camera down because
that's too much.
Too much for me, you know?
That's too much for the news. So I got to find somewhere else.
They rather want having a much more positive,
outlook.
And message in that sense. And I think it's a narrative, right? Again, you know, how much focus do we want? Do we want to focus on obviously your friend had like the Norwegian part of it, right? So it means that they had to reflect on their own history. Whereas your message is like celebrating, we're going to love you guys, and it's like very much positive. But I don't think in any of these kind of topics or anything that you should just focus on the positive, in the sense you have to be able to take care or take the responsibility of that heavy weight of the
confront
negative.
the dark part of the truth.
And I think it's part of life sometimes, you know, it's part of everything. And unfortunately, a lot of these, you know, unpleasant topics, there is a dark side to it. And there is a positive side to it when, like you talking, sharing your story and more people knowing about it. So another person who listens to your story is like, that happened to me, you know? And there are people who go, okay, let's try and do something. You know, even like the Black Lives Matter movement was also done out of frustration of the Norwegian society as well. So I think there is some positivity in that. So I guess, like, with your own experience of growing up and also being, because you said that you lived on the west side as well of Oslo and to the east side.
No, when it came to that topic, it was just that I have realized, according to all my friends, we used to live in the west side called Lindeberg, and we realized there's more police patrol on the west, way more than on the east. Because the east is known as the rich side, you know, where the people that have money live.
On the east side?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were no, it's actually the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, the west side is the
it's the
rich
opposite,
side.
my bad. It's the opposite. I was thinking about California or something now. But it's the opposite. On the east side, where I used to live in Lindeberg, that was, that's the most patrol. On the west side, that was where it was least patrol. That's where I saw the children, were distributing the drugs more often because it was easier there. Because the police was making sure that the east side was under control for some reason.
Right.
So I don't know the reason for that, but
do you still think that there is such a divide between the west and the east of Oslo?
I don't. In my personal opinion, I don't think anymore as much. I don't think so. I haven't, to be honest, that, after the incident with some racist events with my own friends, which didn't understand that I told them I'm not a slave, I'm not an N-word, and they still use it because they say it's like they use it with all the other friends, and the other friends, because the problem is some black people are okay with it, some are not. And that's where the divide comes. So if you have a black friend that is okay with you using the word, that person automatically assumes it's okay to use it on other black people. Anyway, that's not true. So that was their way of saying, you know, it's acceptable because we use it to other friends that are accepted. But I didn't. And I realized, you know, my friends, they're good people in general, but there is too little to relate to them that is healthy for me when it comes to that.
Do you think it's hard to set those boundaries then, you know, in those kind of environments because of your skin color and also the fact that you have told your friend, like, I don't want you using the N-word, and they continue to use it. You know, do you feel like you need to remove yourself from them?
That's the only way I know how, because like I said, I grew up when I told my parents these situations, they were just telling me to hold on. And that's not healthy because eventually you will break. You can hold on for so long before you fall apart. And that's what happened to me. And I decided to distance myself from most of my friends. Not because they are extremely bad people, but I couldn't relate to them enough to be comfortable, to be myself. I could be someone they knew from, you know, 10th grade, 5th grade, but I couldn't be the person I know I am now as a 25-year-old.
I can only imagine that being quite painful because, you know, you basically had a group of friends and then obviously you realized that that's not very healthy, it's very toxic for you, and you removed yourself and you basically almost, I guess, starting from scratch, you know, you went out there making new friends.
Yeah.
So where are you now, I guess? I guess what I'm trying to point is, where are you now and what is your hope of Norway, you know, with you in it?
I realize like now there's a lot more awareness than it used to be, at least when I was growing up. There's a lot more, you know, organizations that are popping up, you know, trying to point out the wrongs and the bad things. And I believe that has helped a lot. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for I would be talking about my own experience. And I think the path Norway is going is a good one, to be, in my opinion. It's slow. It's slow. It almost makes me crazy, but it's slow. But at least I see it's going in a positive way somewhat, especially when each people trying to do at least what they can. Like if it's posting, it's something, you know. Before you couldn't even reach out, you know, when technology was new. I grew up when technology was also growing up. So when I asked my parents about that time, they were like, if you experience something racist, if somebody beats you up because of your skin color, there's little thing you can do because you don't have any way to, you know, show evidence. But now, if that happens, you have a lot of evidence and you can always talk to other people. And social media is doing, the good people on social media is doing what they can. And when it comes to, like I said, Norway, I think it's going in a better path than when I was young, but only time can tell. Yeah.
Is there something else you would like to dive deep into before we close the interview?
I would like to tell like people that have experienced hurtful events, painful, unnecessary situations where it's because of your skin color, your hair color, or whatever, that we are out there. There are many of us that have experienced, you know, discrimination and negative effects from people of higher status or power. And I just know that if most of us come together, that's already terrifying for them. Like when it comes to people that are abusing their power, what they're scared of the most is unification, that people unite and people realize, wait a minute, you are the enemy, not that guy. And that's what made me have hope, because I realized the people that have been racist to me, they just grew up with it. without nobody telling them it's wrong. So that helped me a lot, because that made me realize, even though those police officers that stopped me because for some reason, you know, that's they grew up like that. Maybe somebody told them. Maybe they have experienced something different. You know, maybe something that made them believe that black people are more, you know, a target that to doing bad things than other races, and that made me that's a relief for me, because that made me realize everybody has their own experience, and that's the conclusion of why they do some bad things in the end. So stay strong and try to reach out to other people. You will find people that can relate to you. We are 7 billion people on the earth. I think we can find.
If we join forces, right, with all of our collective forces,
Yeah,
we could make change.
Yeah, make change.
Even though it's slow and, you know, and all of that. So I'm just going to say thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your painful moments with us. I do wish you all the best. Let's hope that we can crush racism and discrimination at some point.
We will one day. We will.
All right.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.